At 2:13 on a Wednesday morning, my phone lit up with a message that erased 24 years of marriage before I even had time to blink. It wasn't from an unknown number. It wasn't spam. It was from my husband. Rachel and I are in Cancun. Don't wait for me. A photograph came with it. The two of them stood ankle deep in the turquoise water, smiling like they had just won the happiest lottery on earth. My husband, Daniel, had one arm wrapped around Rachel's waist. She leaned into him, laughing, wearing the silver bracelet I'd given her on her 40th birthday after she helped care for my father during his final weeks. Rachel wasn't just my cousin. She was the closest friend I'd ever had. She knew every chapter of my life, every fear, every dream, every secret. I looked at the picture for almost a full minute. Not because I couldn't believe it, because I could. There had been little things over the past year. Late-night business trips that somehow lasted longer than expected. Rachel canceling family dinners at the last minute. Daniel suddenly becoming protective of his phone after spending 2 decades leaving it on the kitchen counter without a second thought. The signs had been there. I'd simply trusted the people who were showing them. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my phone across the room. I typed 2 words: travel safely. Then I put my phone down, walked to my home office, turned on my computer, and began doing what I'd spent my entire career doing: following numbers. My name is Claire Morgan. I'm 46 years old, and until that Wednesday morning, I believed my life was wonderfully predictable. I worked as a senior financial compliance manager for a healthcare company outside Cincinnati, Ohio. Every day revolved around audits, expense reports, fraud prevention, and risk analysis. People often joked that I trusted spreadsheets more than emotions. They weren't entirely wrong. Numbers rarely tried to manipulate you. People often did. Daniel Morgan was 49. He owned a commercial remodeling company that had grown steadily over the years. Business had slowed recently, but according to him, every setback was temporary. Whenever cash flow became tight, I covered expenses without asking questions. That's what spouses did. At least, that's what I believed. Rachel Lawson was 3 years younger than me. Growing up, everyone assumed we were sisters. Our birthdays were only weeks apart. We attended the same schools, shared bedrooms during holidays, vacationed together every summer. When my mother passed away, Rachel was the first person standing beside me at the funeral. When Daniel proposed, she cried harder than I did. Some betrayals don't arrive wearing a mask. They arrive dressed as family. I opened my banking dashboard. 1 checking account, 2 investment accounts, retirement savings, 3 supplementary credit cards. Mine, Daniel's, Rachel's emergency travel card. Years ago, Rachel had borrowed one while visiting Europe after her wallet disappeared on a train between Paris and Brussels. She eventually returned it, or so I thought. I never removed her authorization because she never used it again. At least, that was what I believed. I opened the transaction history. The first charge appeared only hours earlier. Cancun Grand Resort, then another. Oceanfront dining, luxury spa, private catamaran excursion, boutique shopping, 5-star seafood restaurant, premium lounge access. Every transaction carried my account number. Thousands of dollars, then thousands more. The charges hadn't started after Daniel's message. They'd started before it. Long before. My heartbeat stayed perfectly steady. That frightened me more than panic ever could. Whenever I became completely calm, it usually meant I had already made my decision. I called the credit card company. A cheerful representative answered almost immediately. "Thank you for calling. How may I help you tonight? I need every authorized user removed from my accounts." She paused. "May I ask why?" "Because they no longer have my authorization." Verification took less than 4 minutes. Daniel's cards stopped working. Rachel's stopped working. Every digital wallet connected to those cards was automatically disabled. Next came online banking, passwords, security questions, 2-factor authentication, transfer approvals, recovery emails, backup phone numbers. I changed everything. Then I searched for an emergency locksmith. 40 minutes later, an old white service van rolled quietly into my driveway. The locksmith climbed out carrying 2 heavy toolboxes. He glanced toward me. "Everything all right, ma'am?" I considered lying. Instead, I answered honestly. "No." He nodded slowly. "I understand." He never asked another question. For nearly 2 hours, drills echoed through my quiet neighborhood. Front door, Garage entrance, patio, basement. Every lock disappeared into a bucket beside his truck. Every new key landed in my hand. When he finished, he held out 3 spare copies. You want extras? I looked at the keys for several seconds. No. You sure? I've decided to be much more careful about who gets one. He offered a tired smile. I hope things get better. So do I. After he drove away, silence settled over the house. I walked slowly through every room. Daniel's golf clubs still rested beside the garage door. His reading glasses sat on the coffee table. Rachel's favorite coffee mug still occupied the second shelf in my kitchen because she'd practically lived here during football season. Nothing looked different. Yet everything had changed. For the first time in years, the house felt like it truly belonged to the person whose name had always been printed on the deed. Most people assumed Daniel and I owned it together. We didn't. I bought the house 8 months before our wedding using money my grandfather left me after he passed away. Daniel moved in after we married. We renovated together. We built a family together. But the ownership never changed. Neither did the investment portfolio my grandfather created decades earlier. Those decisions had never mattered until they suddenly mattered more than anything. By 6:30 that morning, every password had changed. Every account had been secured. Every important document sat neatly arranged across my dining room table. Property deed, investment statements, bank records, insurance policies, credit card agreements. Old habits die hard. If someone wanted to challenge the truth, I'd rather let paperwork answer than emotions. Just after 7, I finally allowed myself 1 cup of coffee. It had barely cooled before someone pounded on my front door. Not a polite knock. 3 hard blows. Then 2 more. For one brief second, I assumed Daniel had somehow made it home from Cancun overnight. Maybe he'd discovered his cards had stopped working. Maybe he'd come to apologize. Maybe he'd come angry. I walked quietly to the entrance and looked through the peephole. 2 uniformed police officers stood on my porch. One older, one younger. Neither looked hostile. Both looked serious. I unlocked the new deadbolt but left the security latch fastened. The older officer removed his cap. Good morning, ma'am. Are you Claire Morgan? Yes. We'd like to ask you a few questions regarding a complaint your husband filed this morning. I looked at the brand new lock between us, then back at the officers. For some reason, I wasn't surprised. I slowly unlatched the security chain and opened the door. Please, I said calmly, come inside. I had a feeling this conversation was about to become much more interesting than either of them expected. Officer Mark Sullivan waited until I closed the front door behind them before introducing himself. This is Officer Perez, he said, gesturing toward the younger officer beside him. Mrs. Morgan, we received a complaint from your husband a little after 6 this morning. I assumed you did. Neither officer expected that answer. Officer Perez glanced briefly at the brand new deadbolt before looking back at me. You don't seem surprised. I'm not. Officer Sullivan opened a small notebook. Mr. Morgan claims you've illegally locked him out of the marital residence, frozen every family bank account, and left him stranded outside the country without access to money. His tone wasn't accusatory. It was simply professional. I nodded once. I understand why he'd say that. Officer Perez frowned slightly. So, is any of it true? I changed the locks? You canceled the cards? Yes. And the accounts? I didn't freeze anyone's money. Officer Sullivan looked up. Can you explain? Of course. I walked into my home office and returned carrying 3 neatly organized folders. Years of auditing had taught me one simple lesson. Important conversations should always include documentation. I placed the folders carefully on the dining room table. Officer Sullivan opened the first one, the property deed. His eyes moved across the page. He checked the purchase date, then read it again. This house was purchased 8 months before your marriage. Correct. And it's titled solely in your name. Yes. Officer Perez leaned closer. Mr. Morgan isn't listed anywhere. No. A brief silence settled over the room. Officer Sullivan closed the folder. Your husband referred to it as our house. It was our home, I answered calmly. Legally, those aren't always the same thing. Neither officer argued. The second folder contained investment accounts, retirement savings, inheritance records, everything dated years before my wedding. Officer Perez slowly turned another page. These are all individual accounts. They've always been individual accounts. What about the credit cards? They're attached to those accounts. So your husband was an authorized user. Officer Sullivan nodded thoughtfully, meaning you had the legal authority to remove that authorization. Exactly. The older officer rested both hands on the folder. So why now? Instead of answering immediately, I unlocked my phone. I opened Daniel's message, then placed it in front of him. Neither officer spoke while reading. Officer Perez's eyebrows rose first. Officer Sullivan read the message again. Then the attached photograph. Cancun? Daniel smiling. Rachel pressed against him. Champagne glasses raised toward the camera. Officer Sullivan quietly handed my phone back. He didn't mention this. I'm sure he forgot. Officer Perez exhaled slowly. So after sending you this, he expected unlimited access to my finances. Officer Sullivan looked toward the fresh locks. I understand why you changed them. So do I. Another silence filled the dining room. Outside, a school bus rolled down the street. Somewhere nearby, a lawnmower started. Ordinary sounds. Inside my home, 24 years of marriage had become little more than paperwork. Officer Sullivan cleared his throat. Mr. Morgan also stated you emptied the accounts. I transferred nothing. You simply removed access. Exactly. Would you mind showing us? Not at all. I logged into my online banking. Every balance appeared. Every investment, every savings account. Nothing had disappeared. Officer Perez studied the screen. The money's all still here. It never left. Officer Sullivan pointed toward the recent transactions. Could you scroll back a little? I did. Cancun charges filled the screen. Luxury restaurants, spa treatments, resort fees, boat rentals, private excursions, boutique purchases. Every charge carried my account number. Officer Perez frowned. Looks like they enjoyed themselves. I suppose they did? I continued scrolling. Then something caught my attention. A transfer, fived $800, 3 weeks earlier. The description read, consulting services. I frowned. Officer Sullivan noticed immediately. Something wrong? I don't remember approving this. I clicked it open. Another transfer appeared. $7,200. Different date, different recipient. Then another. $3,900. Another. $6,100. My fingers stopped moving. Officer Perez leaned closer. You didn't authorize those? No. I filtered every electronic transfer from the previous 12 months. The screen refreshed. My stomach tightened. Dozens of outgoing transfers appeared. Some were only a few $100s. Others exceeded $8,000. Every one carried an electronic approval code. Every one looked legitimate. Until I realized I'd never seen most of them before. Officer Sullivan remained silent. He understood enough not to interrupt. My accounting instincts completely took over. Ignore emotion. Follow evidence. I exported the transactions into a spreadsheet, sorted them by recipient, grouped identical account numbers. The totals began climbing. 10,000. 24,000. 38,000. 49,000. 57,000. My breathing remained perfectly steady. Only my hands had stopped moving. Officer Perez spoke softly. Mrs. Morgan? I looked at both officers. I think my husband has been stealing from me. Neither of them answered immediately, because the numbers sitting on my screen answered for them. Officer Sullivan finally closed his notebook. I think your next call needs to be your bank. I was thinking the same thing. And after that, he hesitated. You should probably speak with an attorney. I already know exactly who to call. The officers stood. As Officer Sullivan reached the front door, he turned back toward me. For what it's worth? Yes? I don't think this is a domestic dispute anymore. I looked once more at the spreadsheet filled with transfers I had never approved. Neither did I. After they left, I locked the door behind them. Not because I was frightened, because habits mattered. Then I carried my laptop back to the dining room. For the next 4 hours, bank statements covered every inch of the table. Wire confirmations, tax records, expense reports, transfer histories. One by one, a second version of my life began revealing itself. And the deeper I looked, the more impossible it became to believe Daniel had acted alone. At exactly 1:42 that afternoon, I picked up my phone and called the one person I trusted to uncover the truth, Victoria Monroe, the best financial litigation attorney I'd ever met. She answered on the second ring. Victoria Monroe. It's Claire Morgan. A brief pause. Claire, you sound different. I stared at another unauthorized transfer glowing on my computer screen. My husband ran away to Cancun with my cousin. Silence. Then I added the sentence that changed everything, and I think he's been stealing from me for nearly a year. Victoria didn't ask another question. She said only 6 words. Don't move a single document. Victoria Monroe arrived at my house a little after 3 that afternoon, carrying a leather briefcase and 2 legal binders. She didn't hug me. She didn't tell me everything would be okay. She looked at the mountain of paperwork covering my dining room table and simply asked, "Have you touched anything since we spoke?" No. Good. She set her briefcase down, rolled up the sleeves of her navy blazer, and looked around the room. "I've represented people during billion-dollar corporate fraud cases," she said. "The ones who win are the people who preserve evidence instead of chasing revenge. I haven't chased anyone. I can see that." For the next several hours, neither of us talked very much. We worked. Victoria reviewed every bank statement while I opened transaction histories dating back almost 2 years. Every suspicious payment received a yellow tab. Every unfamiliar recipient got highlighted. Every electronic approval code went into a separate spreadsheet. By 5 o'clock, my dining room looked less like a home and more like the headquarters of a financial investigation. Victoria finally slid 3 statements across the table. "Look at these." At first glance, they had nothing in common. One payment had gone to a luxury apartment complex, another to an upscale furniture showroom. The third was listed only as professional consulting. Different dates. Different businesses, different amounts. "What am I missing?" I asked. Victoria pointed toward the routing information. "The receiving bank." I leaned closer. Every payment, no matter where it appeared to go, eventually landed inside the same checking account. A slow chill moved through me. So all these businesses, they're feeding one account. My husband's? Victoria didn't answer immediately. "I think we're about to find out." She contacted my bank's fraud department using one of her direct legal contacts. Within 40 minutes, they emailed expanded transaction records. I opened the files. Victoria stood behind my chair. "There," she whispered. "What?" "The authorization logs." Every electronic transfer included an approval record. Every approval contained an IP address. Every single one. Victoria looked at me. "Do you recognize it?" I read the location. Morgan Commercial Renovations. Daniel's office. Not our home. Not my office. His office. Again. And again. And again. I clicked another transfer. Same location. Another. Same result. 27 transfers. 27 approvals. Every one originated from Daniel's business network. Victoria slowly closed the laptop. This just became much bigger. "You think he forged my approvals? I think he made it appear as though you approved payments you never even saw." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. My eyes drifted toward the family photographs still sitting on the bookshelf. One showed Daniel and me celebrating our 20th anniversary. Another showed Rachel standing between us during Thanksgiving, all 3 of us smiling at the camera. Looking at those pictures now, it felt like staring at strangers. Victoria broke the silence. "Tell me about Rachel." I laughed once, not because anything was funny, because the answer suddenly seemed impossible. We've been close since we were children. "Did she ever have financial problems?" "Last year." "What happened?" "She lost her position at a marketing agency." I remembered taking her out to dinner after she lost her job. She cried the entire evening. She worried about paying her mortgage. She said she didn't know how she'd survive. I had believed every word. Victoria wrote something in her notebook, and shortly afterward, I nodded slowly. She suddenly started living differently. "What do you mean? A new SUV, designer handbags, weekend trips, expensive jewelry. What explanation did she give?" I sighed. "She said she'd started consulting." Victoria looked at me. "Did you ever ask who hired her?" "No. Why not?" "Because she was family." Victoria quietly closed her notebook. Trust is often the favorite tool of fraud. Before I could answer, my email notification chimed. The fraud department had sent another attachment. This one contained destination account information. I opened it. Victoria leaned over my shoulder. Neither of us spoke for nearly 30 seconds. The account holder's name finally appeared. Not Daniel Morgan. Not Rachel Lawson. A company. Blue Horizon Property Solutions, LLC. I've never heard of it. Victoria typed the company name into the state business registry. Seconds later, the records appeared. The registered manager wasn't Daniel. It was Rachel. My stomach dropped. She owns the company? It appears so, but she never mentioned starting a business. Victoria clicked deeper into the filing history. The company had been created 11 months earlier, almost exactly when the unauthorized transfers began. Then she opened another document, the registered mailing address. I recognized it immediately. Luxury apartments downtown, the same complex we'd already been paying. Victoria looked at me. I don't think your husband was simply helping Rachel. What do you mean? I think they were building an entirely separate life. Using my money. The sentence hung in the room like smoke. My chest tightened. Every transfer, every shopping trip, every resort charge, every unexplained expense. It all pointed toward one conclusion. Cancun hadn't been the beginning. It had been the celebration. Victoria suddenly noticed something else. Claire. She pointed toward another transaction. Look at this. It wasn't a transfer. It was a monthly storage unit payment. Small, only $98, but it had continued every month for nearly a year. I frowned. Daniel never rented a storage unit. Are you sure? I'm positive. Victoria highlighted the charge. People hiding financial crimes rarely keep everything in one place. You think something's stored there? I think we're going to find out. Before we could discuss it further, another email arrived from the bank. This one made Victoria stop speaking altogether. Attached was a copy of one of the electronic authorization forms. At the bottom was my digital signature. Perfect. Flawless. Identical to the one I'd used for years. Except I'd never signed that document. I stared at it until the room blurred. That's impossible. Victoria didn't look surprised. Do you keep digital copies of your signature anywhere? Then I remembered. 3 years earlier, Daniel convinced me to scan my signature for business emergencies. He claimed it would make paperwork easier whenever I traveled. I had saved it to an external hard drive in my office. Victoria turned toward me. Where is it now? I slowly opened the desk drawer. The hard drive still sat exactly where I'd left it. She plugged it into my laptop. Folders appeared. Taxes, insurance, family photos, estate planning, then one folder I'd never noticed before. Business documents. I didn't create that. Victoria opened it. Hundreds of PDF files filled the screen. Loan applications, vendor contracts, insurance amendments, financial guarantees. Many carried my electronic signature. Many I'd never seen in my life. Victoria looked at me with an expression that told me everything before she even spoke. Claire. What? This isn't just theft anymore. She opened another document. And it isn't just identity fraud. I swallowed. What is it? Victoria closed the laptop. I think your husband has been using your identity to build an entirely separate financial empire. The room became perfectly silent. Outside, thunder rolled across the evening sky. Rain began tapping softly against the kitchen windows. For the first time since Daniel's message from Cancun, I wasn't wondering whether my marriage could be saved. I was wondering how much of my life had never actually belonged to me. Victoria packed several folders into her briefcase before standing. Starting now, she said, You don't answer, Daniel. I won't. You don't answer, Rachel. I won't. If either of them shows up here, I call the police. She smiled faintly. Good. She reached the front door before stopping. One more thing. I looked up. People who think they've committed the perfect fraud almost always make one fatal mistake. What mistake? She opened the door. They come back. As I watched her drive away through the rain, my phone vibrated. A new message. Unknown number. I opened it. Only 4 words appeared on the screen. We're coming home tomorrow. Victoria's prediction came true less than 24 hours later. Saturday afternoon, I was watering the flowers along my front porch when a taxi stopped in front of my house. Daniel stepped out first. The confidence he wore in the Cancun photo had disappeared. His shirt was wrinkled, his face unshaven, and the expensive sunglasses were gone. Rachel climbed out behind him, dragging 2 oversized suitcases. Neither of them looked happy. I quietly walked inside before they reached the porch. 3 loud knocks echoed through the house. Claire, Daniel called. Please open the door. I unlocked the deadbolt but kept the security latch in place. What do you want? He forced a smile. Our cards stopped working. I know. The hotel canceled our reservation. I know. We've been trying to reach you. I know. Rachel stepped forward. Claire, we made a mistake. No, I replied calmly. You made a choice, Daniel sighed. Can we please come inside and talk? No, we're still married. For now. I reached into the hallway cabinet and pulled out a large envelope. Sliding it through the narrow opening, I watched his face turn pale as he read the first page. Petition for divorce. Motion to freeze assets. Request for financial investigation. His hands began to shake. You already hired a lawyer? I hired the right one. Rachel looked over his shoulder. What does this mean? Daniel swallowed hard. It means she's taking everything to court. Just then, 2 police cruisers pulled up in front of the house. Officer Sullivan and Officer Perez stepped out. Good afternoon, Mrs. Morgan. Good afternoon, officers. Officer Sullivan turned to Daniel. Mr. Morgan, you've been instructed to stay off this property. We just wanted to talk. You can do that through your attorney. I pointed toward the garage. Your belongings are packed. Yeah, Daniel turned and saw neatly stacked boxes waiting beside the driveway. For the first time since Cancun, fear replaced confidence. As the officers watched, Daniel silently loaded the boxes into the taxi. Before getting inside, he looked at me one last time. This isn't over. I met his eyes without raising my voice. I know. Next time. You'd better bring your lawyer. The taxi disappeared down the street. Minutes later, my phone vibrated. An email from Victoria. The subject line contained only 4 words. Court date officially confirmed. 4 weeks later, I walked into the county courthouse carrying nothing but my purse. Victoria carried everything else. 2 thick binders. Every page inside was evidence. Daniel sat across the courtroom beside his attorney. Rachel sat behind him. Neither of them looked at me. The judge entered and the hearing began. Daniel's attorney argued first. This is simply a marriage that ended badly, he said. My client made personal mistakes, but Mrs. Morgan retaliated by freezing assets and leaving him financially stranded. Victoria stood without hesitation. This isn't a divorce fueled by revenge. She placed the first binder on the judge's bench. It's a case of financial fraud. The courtroom fell silent. Victoria displayed Daniel's message from Cancun, then the beach photograph. Next came the credit card statements. Luxury hotels, private excursions, designer shopping. Every charge had been made using my accounts. Then she revealed the bank transfers, one after another. Apartment rent, vehicle payments, furniture purchases, insurance premiums. Each payment led back to the same company owned by Rachel. The judge studied every page carefully. Victoria wasn't finished. She projected the authorization logs. Every transfer had been approved from Daniel's office computer. Not my home, not my workplace, his office. Finally, she displayed the forged financial documents carrying my digital signature. A forensic examiner's report confirmed the signatures had been copied without my knowledge. The judge looked directly at Daniel. Did your wife authorize these transfers? Daniel lowered his head. No. Did you use her accounts without permission? Yes. The courtroom became completely silent. Rachel was called next. With tears in her eyes, she admitted she eventually discovered the money belonged to me. But I kept spending it, she whispered. I told myself Daniel knew what he was doing. The judge closed the final binder. This court finds overwhelming evidence that Mrs. Morgan's separate assets were used without her authorization. She signed the order. The marital residence remains the sole property of Mrs. Morgan. The disputed financial accounts remain exclusively hers. Mr. Morgan is ordered to repay the misappropriated funds. She paused before adding one final sentence. The evidence of possible fraud and identity misuse will be referred to the appropriate authorities for further investigation. Daniel's face lost every trace of confidence. The vacation in Cancun had lasted 5 days. The consequences would follow him for years. Outside the courtroom, Victoria handed me the final order. It's over, she said. I looked at the papers, then toward the courthouse doors where Daniel quietly walked away without Rachel beside him. No, I replied. It's finally beginning. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. Daniel's remodeling company collapsed under lawsuits, debt, and the ongoing investigation. Rachel agreed to cooperate with investigators and disappeared from my life forever. As for me, I stayed in the home my grandfather helped me buy. I remodeled the kitchen, planted a garden in the backyard, started volunteering at a nonprofit that teaches women how to recognize financial abuse before it's too late. One quiet evening while watering the roses, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. One message. Can we talk? I smiled, deleted it, blocked the number. Then I looked around my home. Every room was peaceful. Every bill was paid. Every lock had been replaced. Daniel thought he was leaving me with nothing. He never realized that the only thing he took with him was the life I no longer wanted. The greatest revenge wasn't watching him lose everything. It was discovering that after 24 years, I had finally chosen myself.